momentarily. And why am I doing that? Why am I snapping? Sorry, she shoots him in the face 5 times. Just 5. No, it's not. Of thriller, mystery, suspense, horror, all that good stuff. Hi everyone, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today's video is going to finally be my favorite thrillers of 2019. And to be fair, I am including anything in the mystery, thriller, suspense. There is going to be a little horror, sci-fi-ish element to some of these books. It's kind of anything that has any sort of mystery to it. And I am being all-inclusive because I just need it to be. This is the only way I could do this. So, as you guys know, it is my everything. Any kind of book with these elements to it. It is what I gravitate towards. It is what I live for. And out of the 100 books that I read this year, 55 of them were mysteries. And to narrow that down to a smaller list was obviously really difficult. So I did my best. Off the top of my head, I'll be honest, I don't even know how many books I have here, but I wasn't trying to do like a top 5 or a top 19 or anything like that. I just went through the list, everything I loved I pulled, and that's what we're going to quickly talk about today. So the first 3 books I wanted to mention are sort of like honorable mentions for me. So it's not that I didn't love them in some way or another, but perhaps I didn't love them as much as the others, but they're still all outstanding books. And the first one I wanted to talk about is The Chain by Adrian McKinty, and we're getting all the lights glaring on this. So this is such an incredibly well done book that I flipped through compulsively like a crazy person. And the concept of this book is that in the beginning, our character's child is kidnapped, and the only way that she can get her daughter back is that she has to kidnap somebody else's child. And when that couple kidnaps someone, her child will be set free. So incredibly messed up, like nobody's business, and I loved it. And I would say like the first half of this book is that entire journey of trying to get her daughter back and doing heinous, horrible things that she will do to get her daughter back, and inflicting all of the pain on another family that she is going through with her daughter being kidnapped. So it is so interesting and twisted, and I loved it. And where this book fell a little bit off for me is that the second part of this book, which explains how the chain and the people who like run the chain became the chain, feels like a completely different book to me. And we have this like hyper dramatic conclusion to it, which, while page turning and at times tense and super action packed and fast moving, and I wanted to know what was going to happen, it almost felt like 2 different stories or 2 different books were being told. So I wish we had stuck with the vibe of the original part of the story. I don't know how it would have ended if we stuck that way, but it was my one hang up with this book. But still, I think it's a great thriller. I think it was a great ride. Super inventive concept. I was completely pulled into that entire storyline, and I loved that part of it. The second book in my honorable mention is For Better or Worse by Margot Hunt. And this is another twisted book. Welcome to the theme of this video here. And it is a couple who are, they are attorneys. They met in law school, and sort of in the opening of the book, they're kind of on their first date, and they talk about committing the perfect murder and how they could get away with it because they're so much smarter than everyone else. And then we fast forward several years. They are married. They have a child in elementary school, and there is a teacher at that school who winds up being suspended because there are talks that he has abused some of the children at school. And there's a lot of speculation about whose child is a victim of this. And these parents find themselves in a situation where they are as lawyers, aware of what children would go through if they accuse someone of abusing them, and how the children are not really treated well by the court system, and all sort of the emotional distress that that child will have to go through to prosecute the adult. So they sort of revisit that conversation of how to get away with the perfect murder and what they will do to protect their child. And it puts people in, like, sort of normal people in extraordinary circumstances, and the lengths that you will go to save your child and to protect your family. Super twisted. Loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was fun ride is the wrong word for it. I thought it was a wild story. I loved it. I loved how twisted the characters were. This was definitely like unlikable people that you could love in sort of a kind worth killing type of a way. I listened to the audiobook of this, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Margot Hunt has a new book coming out in 2020 that I'm super excited to read. So also loved this one. There were a couple elements to it that didn't completely nail it for me, which is why it's an honorable mention, but I think it's a completely worthwhile read as well, and loved that one. And then the last book in this category I wanted to mention is Sadie by Courtney Summers. And I also did the audiobook of this, which was tremendous. And this was sort of two stories taking place where we had Sadie, whose sister was murdered like a year earlier. And Sadie knows, or believes she knows, who killed her sister. And she is on a journey to find that person. And then Sadie herself goes missing. So then the story picks up where we have sort of this local interest and this local, or this national podcast that winds up kind of following the true crime story of Sadie. And we see the story through Sadie's perspective, and then we see it kind of like months later with the podcast following in her footsteps. And what's beautiful about the audiobook is it is done in such an authentic way, is that it sounds like you're listening to an actual podcast. So we have different narrators, different voices in this, but it is all the intricacies of, like, the podcaster is interviewing people at a diner, and you hear like the bell at the door and you hear the plates clanging, and it sounds like you're authentically there. So I loved that part of it. Where it got a little bit, again, not quite the perfect book for me, is we see everything through Sadie's perspective, and then we kind of like see the story again through the podcaster. So there's a bit of repetition, but you understand why there is for the story. There's a little ambiguity to it, which I'm okay with. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was well done. It is one that surprised me, and I had heard so many great things about it and wanted to pick it up. So again, another one that I thoroughly enjoyed. So there we go for my honorable mentions. I feel like I said 3 honorable mentions. There's 4. There's just... Your girl can't count right now. But the last one I wanted to mention is Girls with Sharp Sticks by Suzanne Young. And this is a book that I heard about from Mel to the Any. And this is, I guess, kind of like sci-fi dystopian-ish, but there's a mystery to it, which is how it wound up in this category. And there's a little bit of an element to this that reminded me of The Handmaid's Tale, in that we have these girls who were selected and who are sequestered in this school. So sort of the rest of the world is happening around them. Happening around them. But they're in this private school that their parents have put them in, and they're basically being groomed to be the perfect wife. So they are learning, how to do flower arrangements and how to do the perfect dinner. So they're not in a school to learn about math and science and all of these things. They're in a school to learn how to be the perfect wife. And then men come and sort of meet them and check them out and decide if they want to select them to come be their wives. So it's all shades of messed up. But for these girls who are shut off from the outside world and have no access to like the internet or the news or anything, all they know is one another and the teachers in the school and their parents. They don't know any different and they don't know any better. But what winds up happening at the beginning of this book, which sets it in motion, is one of the girls, they're out on a field trip, and basically one of the girls meets someone at a gas station where they have stopped to buy candy and other things that the school allows them to do, kind of gets a hint that this life that she's living is not normal, and she begins to question things, and that's what sort of sets everything in motion. And this is another book, again, that surprised me in so many different ways. And I thought it was smart, and I thought it was interesting, and I thought it was compelling. And it took a turn that I didn't expect it to take, and like in a nice twisty kind of a way. So I very much enjoyed it. There is a sequel to it, Girls with Razor Hearts, that's coming out this year that I'm definitely going to check out. But put it on this list because it very much is a book I never would have picked up, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Didn't expect to love it as much as I did, and really just thought it was like a great, enjoyable read. Okay, so let's get into the books that I wholeheartedly loved this year in the thrillers category, all-encompassing. And the first one I want to talk about, these are in no order as far as like what I liked most to not most. That's just not how I function. But this is the first thriller that I read in 2019, which came from a recommendation from Lisa at Books and Smiles, who I'm so bummed is not making videos anymore because her recommendations were so strong. But definitely go back and look at old videos of hers because there's so many good ones to glean, so many good recommendations to glean from her. But this was in her best of 2018, and she basically was like, I dare you to pick this book up and be able to put it down again. Like, I read it in 24 hours. It's incredible. And I was watching her video at night, went onto Hoopla, found this book. It was like 10:30 at night, started to read it. Went to sleep because I'm human and I'm pooped. Woke up the next morning, and all I did the next day was basically eat and read this book until I was done. And it was not a small book, and it was The One by John Mars. And oh my God, you guys, this book is amazing. This book has a bit of a sci-fi twist to it, but still has that mystery thriller kind of aspect to it, in that the concept of this book is it's like 10 years in the future, and it's a twist on the online dating, in that it's not even so much that you have like a soulmate match out there, but what if your DNA could connect you to your perfect soulmate? And everyone is sending in their DNA, and science is matching you up with your soulmate. And there is one for everyone. And part of the twist is that you only find your match if your soulmate has also participated in it. So there's no guarantee that everyone in the world is doing this. So there's a lot of people out there waiting to get their results in. And on the flip side, there are a lot of people who are finding out that the person they are with is not their true soulmate. So as a result of this science, people are getting divorced, people are moving across the country, people are leaving their families. There's all sorts of disruption that's happening. And where this book opens is our 5 points of view characters are all getting the letter about who their DNA match is, and it's how their lives change. And where part of the mystery twist comes in is one of our 5 characters is a serial killer. So don't you know, that's who I would have been matched up with. But this book is so intriguing. It is these short, quick chapters. They leave you on cliffhangers. They keep changing perspectives. I dare you to pick it up and be able to put it down because it's so dang good. I can't wait to read more John Mars. I want to read The Good Samaritan. I want to read The Passengers, which is his newest one. He's got another one coming out in 2020, but new to me author, hands down, banner way to start off 2019. This book blew me away. Next up, which is a book that I read just recently, is Someone We Know by Sherry LaPena. And this is more of a domestic thriller, neighborhood suspense. And I actually just read this in the beginning of November. I read The Couple Next Door by Sherry LaPena a couple years ago when it came out, and I thoroughly enjoyed that book and this one. And this is, again, sort of this neighborhood, a little Wisteria Lane-ish is how I felt, without sort of the dark humor of it. But we have all these neighbors with their secrets and their complicated histories and their complicated relationships. And on the first page of the book, we find out that one of the women on the street is murdered, brutally murdered. And we don't find out who it is right away. And then we also find out that the son of one of the couples on the street has basically been breaking into people's houses and hacking into their computers for fun, because he basically wants to be a hacker and wants to see if he can. And he winds up getting caught by his parents. So the mom, having tremendous guilt over this, sends anonymous letters to the families and the houses that he's broken into, and basically is like, hey, my kid broke into your house, so sorry about that. And then basically a day or two later, we find out that one of the women on the street has been murdered. And now that letter is out there, and it's causing all sorts of complications for everyone. So we've got the murder investigation, and then we have this family trying to protect their son, who is he or isn't he involved in the murder of the woman in the neighborhood. So I really enjoyed this. There's a bit of police investigation to it, which is something I always love, but it's not like hardcore investigation. I thought it was a great book. I really enjoy her writing style. I enjoy her characters. I liked the twists and turns that went along with it, but at the same time, it felt very like relatably authentic in the connections in the neighborhood and the small town feel of it all. So big fan of this book. Another book that was huge kind of across the board this year and that I could not resist picking up myself is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides or Michaelides. I'm not sure which. I still need to look this up. I'm a horrible human. This book completely blew me away also. And this is one of those books where there is a group of people who were like, oh my God, I totally saw that twist coming. How did you not? And then there were people like me who were like, what just happened? And I'll be honest, I'm happy I was not a person who saw the twist coming because it made me enjoy this book so much more, I think. And I was in it for the story. I wasn't looking for the twist. So when it hit me something hard. And this is about a woman named Alicia. And basically, Alicia has like shot her husband in the face like 6 times and hasn't spoken since. And I think this was like 5 years ago. I just looked at the inside flap. You think I would pay attention to something like that? Sorry, she shoots him in the face 5 times. Just 5. So it was several years ago, and she has been committed to basically an asylum for the criminally insane, I guess I would say, if that's probably like a polite way to put it. And there is a psychologist, psychoanalyst, psychotherapist named Theo, who is convinced that he is the only person who's going to be able to get her to talk. And he is fascinated with her case and works his way into getting a job at this place and works his way into being her therapist so that he's going to be the one who's going to finally get through to this woman who hasn't spoken in years. And this is sort of their relationship and kind of the obsession that's driving Theo and trying to figure out what happened that night and why Alicia won't speak of it and sort of what drove her to do this to her husband. So I thought it was great. I mean, there are, a little suspension of disbelief in some places with this book in that there's not a lot of other patients in this place, it seems. But that's okay, because I don't really care about the other patients. I care about Alicia. It's a story about Alicia and Theo, and that's what's important to me. So I very much enjoyed this book. I thought it was a great ride. I read it really quickly. I'm very interested to see what else he writes. Like, I'm in it. My antenna is up for more books by him and more stories by him. But I found it to be completely enjoyable and like a definitely like hands down worthwhile thriller. Totally. The next book I would say also was probably a little sci-fi fantasy, but I'm putting it here because I felt like a little mystery suspense to it. I'm probably pushing the boundaries here, but it's Vicious by V.E. Schwab. And I've talked about this ad nauseum as well if you follow my channel, and if you don't, short story, I started listening to a ton of podcasts this year, and I was listening to a whole bunch by Victoria Schwab because I found her completely fascinating and engaging as a writer and as a storyteller, and talking about her craft and her journey. And she has written just such a huge range of stories and so many different series, and she started writing at a very young age and just wholeheartedly committed to it in a way that I'm so jealous of. That she had sort of such clear vision and such a willingness to take that kind of risk and just go all in when she was like 19 years old. And I wish I had been that person. But I got completely fascinated by her, and then sort of went down this well of like, I need to read something this woman has written, because there's no way I can be as fascinated with her as I am and not fall in love with some of her books. So this is the one I opted to pick up, and I'm so happy I did because I loved this story. And this was another one that completely took me by surprise, that I never would have picked up on my own had it not been for listening to those podcasts and discovering her that way and sort of getting to know her through the podcasts, because it made me much more intrigued about her as a writer. And this is a story about 2 best friends, Victor and Eli, who are in grad school when it starts, and basically both working on their theses. And what they discover is that you can have a near-death experience and come back to life. And when you come back to life, basically have some superpowers. So there's like a total superhero element to this. And this is the beginning of the story. And then we pick it up 10 years later, and Victor is getting out of jail, and he is on a mission to basically stop Eli from wreaking havoc in the world. But Eli doesn't see it that way, and Eli sees himself as the hero of the story. So this is the morally gray, who's good, who's bad, you know, who's right, who's wrong. There is a quote in the beginning of this book, which I have read in other videos of mine, but I'm going to read it again because it needs to be, because it is really sums it all up. And it's a quote by Joseph Brodsky at the opening of the book, which says, "Life, the way it really is a battle not between bad and good, but between bad and worse." And that is very much what happens between Victor and Eli. So it is not good versus evil, it is bad versus worse. And they are extraordinary people living in this world, and it is one hell of a ride. And I loved it, and I love the characters in this book, and I love the complications, and I love the morally gray. And I'm very excited to pick up Vengeful, which is the sequel to this. Again, just eye-opening to read outside a genre that I'm comfortable in. There is like a mystery element to it, like I said, but there really is a sci-fi fantasy element to this and a little superhero element to it. And I loved it. It blew me away in how much I enjoyed it. The writing was great. I thought the storytelling was amazing. I love the language. I love the conversation and the complicated relationships and all of it. I just thought it was so well done. Can't say enough great things about it. So highly, hugely recommend. If you have any hesitation on any of these books, pick them up, because this one's great. So it's funny to me that I talked such a big game about not reading books other than like thrillers, and putting up a bit of a stink about some YA mystery thrillers or YA books in general, because a bunch of these books fall into that category, like the next one, which is A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. And this is the first book in the Charlotte Holmes Jamie Watson series, which I am in the middle of officially now. And I read this just at the end of December. Again, this is why I don't do these best of videos until the end of the year, because this is another book that took me by surprise in that I loved it so much more than I expected to. And Charlotte Holmes is the great-great-great-granddaughter of Sherlock Holmes, and Jamie Watson is the great-great-great-grandson of John Watson. And they wind up meeting at a boarding school in Connecticut, and, you know, somebody winds up getting murdered early on in the book. And they pair up, Holmes and Watson, to solve the case. But this is so much more complicated than that. It is so much darker than I expected. The language is, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it is smart and witty, and the relationship is complicated, and the relationship with other people is complicated, and what is going on in their lives. And, you know, Charlotte smokes, and she has a drug problem, and there is some super darkness to both of their pasts and their family, obviously. And it is sort of this whole woven history of being descendants of Holmes and Watson, and the connection that the family has always had over the years. And there is reference to the Moriartys as their rivals. And I was not like a huge Sherlock Holmes reader, in that it was something that I was, I read Hound of the Baskervilles when I was younger, and right before I read this, I read A Study in Scarlet because I was curious. I wanted to sort of read the original material. This is not a retelling in any way. There are references to Holmes' books in here, but they are, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's books, I should say, but Holmes' stories that are explained, so you don't have to be a Sherlock Holmes aficionado to be able to read this book. But I loved it. I thought it was great. I'm completely engrossed in the story. I'm totally in it with both of them. I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. But highly recommend this one. It just, again, it completely took me by surprise, which is one of the things that made it a favorite for me. And I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving this series. So that's going to do it for part 1 of my 2019 favorite thrillers, mysteries, suspenses of the year. Obviously, I went on too long and there's way too many books to talk about. So we're going to do this in 2 parts to keep it manageable for all of you guys. But thank you for watching today. I hope you decide to tune back in to the next video. Feel free to hit that subscribe button if you want to know when it's coming. And I look forward to seeing everybody really soon in the next one. Bye, guys.